Hello and welcome to this video series on getting started with Apache Kafka. So this is going to be a series that is focused on introducing you to some of the terminologies, concepts, architectures, and best practices for using the Apache Kafka ecosystem for event processing. So let's get started. So in this video series, we're going to be talking about some of the topics like an overview of the Apache Kafka ecosystem, what is involved, what are some of those components and what they are used for and why they are there. And then we're going to also go over some of the industry use cases for the Apache Kafka ecosystem. We're going to talk about how producers work, what they are and how they work. And then we're also going to talk about what consumers are and how they work. Then we're going to talk about message delivery semantics. So this is how messages can be delivered in Apache Kafka. So we have three major strategies, and then the most important one is the exactly one semantic. So later on, we're going to talk about how that works and what it means. Then we're going to talk about options for how you can do stream processing. So we have a KSQL DB. We also have Kafka streams. Then we'll discuss why you will pick one over the other and what are some of the advantages and some of the challenges with each one. Then we will discuss why you would need a Schema Registry, what the Kafka REST proxy is about and how it works. And then if you have any other topic that you would like to hear, please feel free to send me an email at ask@easyacademy.com. You can also post it on Twitter or Instagram using the hashtag AskEasyAcademy. So now, there will also be some advanced topics in this series. So we'll take a look at Kafka streams in more details. We'll also talk about KSQL DB in more details. Then there's a concept called windows. So we'll talk about what some of the different window types are and how you can use them either in KSQL DB or in Kafka streams. Then we'll talk about what transactions are in the Apache Kafka ecosystem. What exactly one semantics is all about. There's a new tool now that was just released by Confluent called the Confluent Parallel Consumer. So I will talk about what this is about and how you can use it to improve the performance of your consumers. Then we'll talk about how you can secure your Kafka cluster. So what are some of the challenges with this and what are the best ways to do it. Then we'll also talk about how you can ensure high availability. What are some of the steps you can take within your cluster to ensure that your cluster can survive a disaster, and you can also have business continuity if something goes wrong. We'll also talk about what are some of the architectures and options and best practices for setting up your Kafka cluster in on-premise environments, in cloud environment, and also in hybrid scenarios. Then if there's any other advanced topic that you would like to hear, please feel free to either email me or you can post it on Instagram and Twitter using the hashtag AskEasyAcademy, and I will take a look at that and get back to you and also work on creating that content. So in this particular tutorial, we're going to be talking about the components of the Apache Kafka ecosystem. So the first component is going to be the producers, the consumers, and all those things. But I just want to recap what event stream processing is all about. So with event stream processing, what we really want to do, we have a business use case where we have the need to constantly generate data. So we need an effective mechanism where we can store this data. We also need an effective mechanism where we can retrieve this data. Then we also need an effective mechanism and strategy to process this data efficiently and in a timely manner. Now, the processing can be in real time or near real time, meaning that this is when the event happens, and as soon as it happens, you receive it and you process it. Now, the processing could involve you filtering the data, meaning you could drop some of the data. It could also involve you enriching it or you adding additional fields to this particular data. So once this is processed, it is typically put back into Kafka and then routed to other databases or other data workloads like MySQL database. It could be a blob storage, it could be HDFS, or any other data store of your choosing. So event-driven processing is very important when you have a business use case that involves the constant generation of data, the processing of this data, and the routing of this data to other destinations or data stores or databases. So now that we have recapped that, let's take a look at some of the Apache Kafka ecosystem components that are typically involved in some of these architectures that I just mentioned. So we have the brokers. Now the brokers, this is where the data is stored. So data in Apache Kafka is stored in a data structure called a topic. So you can think of a topic like a database table. Now the topic is the smallest entity in which you can use to represent a particular set of data types or data structures. So all the messages in a particular Kafka cluster on the brokers are stored in these topics. Now within these topics, we have something called a partition, which allows you to create like small segments in which you can use to put your messages. So on the brokers, we have topics, and then topics is where we have these messages in the Kafka cluster that is being stored. And then a topic can also be subdivided into smaller partitions. This will allow you to be able to retrieve the data in a much more efficient way down the line. So the brokers are used to store the message. Now, we also have the admin API. Now, this allows you to perform certain administrative tasks like taking a look at the health of the cluster, taking a look at, more importantly, what is in the topics, how the topics are doing, and how the message is distributed across the cluster. So with the admin API, you can inspect the broker, you can inspect the topics, you can also perform some administrative tasks that allow you to manage your cluster effectively. Then we have producers. So these are the agents, or these are the processes that are responsible for generating the messages that are being stored in the broker. So the producers are the part of the ecosystem components that actually create the messages that are going to be put inside the Apache Kafka cluster in the brokers. So the consumers are now the ecosystem components or the agents that are responsible for retrieving the messages out of the broker. So the producers write the messages to the cluster on the brokers that are stored there, and then the consumers now communicate with the brokers to retrieve those messages. So in either case, the brokers don't actually pull messages from the producer, and the brokers do not push messages to the consumers. So the brokers are just waiting to be contacted either by the producer to push the messages to the cluster, or by the consumers to retrieve the messages from the cluster. Now we have connectors. So connectors belong to two major families. So we have the source connectors, which act as a producer. So the source connector's responsibility is to allow you to move data from other data stores or workloads into Apache Kafka cluster. So those connectors that are kind of like producers are called source connectors, because they communicate with other data stores and they act as a source of data. So they will retrieve the data from those databases or data stores, and then they will publish it into the Apache Kafka broker. So those are the source connectors that act as producers, writing messages to the Apache Kafka broker. Now we have another set of connectors called sync connectors. So these sync connectors, their responsibility is to move data out of the Apache Kafka brokers into other data stores or workloads. So the sync connectors act as consumers that retrieve data from the Kafka broker, and then they publish those events into the destination databases. So connectors allow you to move data in and out of Kafka using the API, and either move data into Kafka or they move data out of Kafka. And then we have two of them. Then we have stream processors. So once the data is stored into Kafka, sometimes you may have the need to either filter the events. You may have the need to transform it from one format to a different format. You may also have the need to perform enrichment, meaning adding new fields or taking out some of the fields from the events. So with this, we have two major ecosystem components that can be used to do this. We can also use the consumer API to do this, but there is a much simpler option, which means you can either use Kafka streams, the Java API, to do this. Sometimes you can also use Scala, but majority of the times I use Java to do the stream processing with the Kafka Streams API. Confluent also created an open source framework called KSQLDB. So with KSQLDB, you can use a SQL-like syntax to perform event stream processing as well, instead of having to write the code to do that. So that has some advantage in that it lowers the bar for you to be able to enter without really being a proficient software engineer or someone that can write Java or Scala code effectively. So you have two options to do stream processing. The first one is with programming using the Kafka Streams API, and the second option is by using a SQL-like interface known as KSQLDB from Confluent to perform event stream processing with all the messages that are inside the Kafka broker. Now we now have something called the Schema Registry. So Schema Registry is another open source product from Confluent that allows you to keep track of the different data structures that are stored in your topic. It also allows you to keep track of the versions of the different data structures. So as the data structures change and evolve over time, the Schema Registry is keeping track of that so that when messages arrive, it will have the data structure type. It will also have the version of the message. So the people that are producing the message and the people that are consuming the message, they can use the Schema Registry to notify other members of the ecosystem components that this is the data structure that is inside this topic, and this is also the version of that data structure. So that's what the Schema Registry is being used for, to keep track of the data structures of the events and also the versions of those data structures. Then we have the REST proxy, which provides you with a REST API that allows you to go ahead and interact with the cluster to see what's going on with the brokers and what's going on with the topics. And so it is very useful without having to write code, and you can use this to interact with the cluster. So it kind of leverages the admin API to do some of these responsibilities and provide some of these functionalities. So that was everything I had for this particular video. This is just the beginning. So if you have any question, feel free to let me know. But I would like you, if you found this particular content to be helpful, please go ahead and share it with your friends or anyone you think would find this useful. You can also subscribe to this channel and click on the notification icon so that when I upload this new video series, you can be able to get the notification and you can, check it out and benefit from it, and also let me know, if you like it. And then finally, if you have any suggestions or you have feedback that you'd like to share with me, please feel free to send that to me directly at ask@easyacademy.com. So that was everything I had for this particular video. I thank you very much for your time, and please feel free to give me a thumbs up on the video if you like it, and let me know how you think. So thank you very much for your time, and I will see you in the next video.